In a matter of days, the nation could see just not the first woman president-elect, but also the first gentleman. A few hours ago, I joined Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff on the campaign trail in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, for his final television interview before Election Day. A disclaimer, I once worked for the Vice President, shocker, as her senior advisor and chief spokesperson. I was also with her on the campaign trail in 2020 when she joined the ticket of the then Biden campaign. Here's the first part of our conversation, beginning with Trump's attempts to downplay the bigotry on display at his recent Madison Square Garden rally. You actually responded in real time to what Donald Trump had to say just this morning on Fox and Friends, particularly about Puerto Ricans. He said that Puerto Ricans will tell you that nobody's done more for Puerto Rico than me. The former president goes on to say, look, he's mentioned Puerto Rico and they made it a big deal. Were the comments from that comedian at Donald Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden a big deal? Of course they were. And look at the reaction. It's the fact that he still can't disavow it. You didn't hear those words come out of his mouth, apologize for it, and just even understand how hurtful and just despicable those comments were. And that just is kind of what the whole message that they have is about. It's about them, a grievance, and nothing about us. And then you have Kamala Harris, who actually has a plan for Puerto Rico to rebuild, electrify, and participate in this burgeoning opportunity economy. And you don't hear Trump talking about that at all, and you never do. So yeah, it's outrageous. Look at what Bad Bunny, J-Lo, and the entire community is so outraged, and they should be. By what was said. I mean, they all endorsed the vice president shortly after those remarks. It was, you couldn't make it up. You literally couldn't have written a better script, frankly, for your campaign perspective. I mean, the vice president rolls out her policy for Puerto Rico that morning, and later in the afternoon, on a stage in Madison Square Garden, the largest concentration of Puerto Ricans outside of Puerto Rico, they live in New York. And a comedian on the stage is denigrating and insulting Puerto Ricans, also, I mean, black people in this country, Haitians. There were derogatory comments made about Jewish people and Palestinian people on that stage. And then all those endorsements come. Do you think that this is that is the turning point, if you will, one of the many turning points in the campaign in this final stretch? I think people are seeing and hearing and knowing the ramifications of what would happen, God forbid, if Trump came back. And Kamala said it herself at her great speech on the ellipse. Just in 90 days, one of those two is going to be sitting behind that Resolute desk in the Oval Office. One person who is in charge of that entire chaotic situation that unfolded at Madison Square Garden, the hate, the grievance, nothing about the American people, who would be sitting there literally with his grievance and enemies list, figuring out retribution rather than policy. Then you have the vision of Kamala Harris sitting there with her to-do list, focus on the needs of all of us, Americans, and where we stand on the world stage. And I think it's a combination of not just being against Trump, which everyone is now, I think this Trump nostalgia and this Trump fog of misinformation and disinformation, people are finally seeing through. And if what happened at Madison Square Garden is a clarifying event, great. But what they're really seeing is how amazing Kamala Harris is going to be as president. They're actually seeing her and listening to her and thinking that's what we need. And that's why moderates, independents, and a lot of Republicans are coming out for her because of her plans, her confidence, her competence, and they can see her as president, and then they are reminded of what it was like when he was president, the chaos, the incompetence, the grievance, we can't, they say we can't go back as a slogan, but it's true. It's not just a slogan. It's not just a slogan. We really can. I think people are now realizing it because the election's right in front of our face, and she's done such a good job at not only getting people to focus on how terrible it would be with Trump, but how great
she would be. So it's a combination of all those factors.
You know, you mentioned Republicans. I did not have on my bingo card Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney endorsing, not just endorsing the vice president's campaign, but Liz Cheney has been out on the campaign trail with Vice President Harris. There have been other Republicans who work for Donald Trump. I'm thinking of Olivia Troy, right, Sarah Matthews, who have done events with the campaign. Liz Cheney has said recently that she thinks former President George W. Bush should also come out and say what he thinks about this election.
Look, we want to hear from any American who puts country over party. And I think that is the message I'm hearing. I was just in Nevada a couple of days ago, door knocking, and this wasn't even a door I was knocking on. Some guy ran out of the house and, flagged me down, and he said, "I'm a Republican. Kamala Harris is the first Democrat I've ever voted for in my life because I'm putting country over party." And so that's why you see Adam Kinzinger and others. So what I tell Republicans is, it's and a lot of them, like Vice President Pence, Secretary Esper, and you heard what General Kelly said.
Oh, yes, General Kelly had lots of thoughts.
Right, and they're not supporting John Bolton. They were in the room with him. So whether they're supporting Harris or not, they should. It should be very chilling to a lot of Americans that the people who were in the room, who were there, who saw it firsthand, are not supporting him and are literally ringing the alarm bells. That's what John Kelly was doing. That's what General Milley was doing, saying he's a fascist to the core, literally begging people to pay attention that this man is unfit to be president of the United States.
What y'all think?
I could barely hear the substance of the interview because I was so taken by how calm, cool, and collected he was. I mean, you and I are built differently. Have you ever been that calm, cool, and collected this close to an election day?
Yes. Sorry.
I mean,
Yes.
look, I guess the chairman is.
You gotta be.
But to me, it's a tell.
Yeah, but it's an important tell. But look, I just appreciated the way he approached the conversation. He just really conversationally, through you, telling us about his wife, who is the vice president, who could be the next president. And that sort of personal side of it really comes through. And so we're going to see more of this. And I'm really looking forward. And I think everyone else will really get the complete picture of what the first gentleman could be like. But more importantly, I think just sort of that calmness. I mean, that's the one thing in the interviews that both Kamala and Doug and others give. It's just calm. I mean, you don't walk away going, okay, I got to hit something. I got to go. It's just.
Perhaps it was because he had just did a rally earlier that day with the Latino caucus in Pennsylvania, and then also members of the Black Caucus, a Puerto Rican specific in Lancaster, and then a number of folks went out and they canvassed. So we actually got to see him go on a canvas, knock some doors, talk to some voters. He himself voted by mail already, and he bumped into a lot of people at the doors and said, some of them said they voted by mail. Some other folks were like, we are going to go vote on election day. But what struck me about it is that it was effortless for him. And politics is not something, the second gentleman was doing. He was a lawyer, a business entertainment lawyer, a very successful litigator, actually, had, lots of amazing clients. And so we actually talk about, and he represented a lot of corporate folks. So we actually get into and talk about just the business aspect of the economic argument. And he talks about, like, yeah, I know these guys. And he said, let me just break it down for you. And that is something that I think the second gentleman has grown into in his own in time. And much like the vice president, he didn't have to get ready for this moment when 15 weeks ago, when she became the top of the ticket. They were ready. She was ready. He was ready. And I'm looking forward to people see our little conversation about bro culture. We get into the bro culture. We talk about masculinity, all the things.
There we go.
I'm very glad that you began with MSG and centered that in your conversation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, come on now. I got to stand with my Puerto Rican brothers and sisters. Some people, Puerto Ricans are black people. We claim them.
Can you tell that we are not done?